Recent shock polls show Vice President Kamala Harris is rapidly closing the gap with Donald Trump on matters of the economy as the stock market continuously breaks records in the best possible way under the Biden-Harris administration. And hilariously, the Fox propaganda network is visibly struggling to cope with this fact. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video, some of them very recent, some of them over the course of the past week. And I definitely want to dive into some of the shock polls here, which show a very positive trend for Vice President Harris and the Democrats. But to give you a teaser, a palate cleanser of the cope and struggles coming from the Fox propaganda network, I want to show you this clip, which is from earlier today. Stuart Varney is a Fox News host, a Fox Business host, and he's one of the more reasonable ones. But he's still conservative, and he still knows where he works and what the political ideology is. I want you to see this clip, how he frames bombshell blockbuster stock market performance under Vice President Harris and President Biden, how he addresses this and how quickly he pivots away.
Because the Dow has hit another all-time high, now up 431 points. Minor loss for the Nasdaq is down 54. Coming up, Kamala Harris has been touting her record as Attorney General in California to prove she is a law and order candidate. But many of the policies she supported are directly responsible for the state's decline. Leo Terrell, because the Dow...
See that? Excellent. This is a Fox Business, Fox News host, right? Somebody who should be really focused on the more market aspects of things, more economic aspects of public policy and politics. But he quickly just says, yeah, okay, the stock market's doing really well, another record-breaking day. Doesn't mention President Biden or Vice President Harris the way you know they would if Donald Trump were president. And then quickly pivots into a story about the vice president's record of failures. Look at that chyron. Very unflattering chyron and very unflattering images of the vice president. They're trying to, these pictures of her laughing, just pretty obvious propaganda stuff here that they're not happy with how well the stock market is doing under the vice president, and they don't want to draw attention to it and instead want to pivot to something more in their wheelhouse. So we'll come back to that. But before we do, Newsweek and the Washington Post are talking about this. Newsweek just dropped this earlier today. Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump on economy in new poll. Vice President Kamala Harris is trusted more to handle key election issues surrounding the economy than Donald Trump, according to a poll. An Echelon Insights national survey of 1,000 registered voters showed that more than a quarter of respondents believe the cost of living was the biggest issue facing the country today, followed by jobs and the economy. When asked which presidential candidate they trusted to do a better job on the cost of living, 48% backed Harris against 45% of Trump. On jobs and the economy, Harris was also ahead 47% to Trump's 45%. This is not the first poll. We talked about a Financial Times poll which talked about this, as well as other polls, which either show the vice president ahead on the economy or when she's behind, as most of the polls show. I want to be very clear about this. More polls than not favor Trump on the economy over Harris. But even those polls show her rapidly gaining on him and closing that colossal advantage that Donald Trump otherwise has. The Washington Post talked about this as well. Trump is losing his edge on the economy among voters. After years of discontent, Americans appear to be feeling better about the economy. What's changed? Americans are finally starting to feel better about the economy, invigorating Vice President Harris's pitch for the presidency as she narrows her Republican opponent's longtime lead on an issue that is foremost on voters' minds. Although voters still favor Donald Trump over Harris on handling the economy, his advantage has dropped dramatically in recent weeks. Trump now averages a 6 percentage point edge on the economy compared with a 12-point lead against President Biden earlier this year, according to an analysis of 5 polls that measured voters' opinions before and after Biden dropped out. A Fox News poll this month, for example, found that 51% of registered voters favor Trump in the economy, compared with 46% who favor Harris. That's compared with a 15-point advantage Trump had on Biden in March. So again, folks, in a relatively short amount of time, she is rapidly closing the gap. Now, we talk about this on this channel that Republicans have enjoyed a completely unearned, indefensible perception advantage on the economy. I think much of this has to do with the fact that the Republicans talk a really good game, okay? So whether we like it or not, I think we voters tend to correlate or to compare a national macroeconomy compared to our personal finances. And so when Republicans say we need to cut costs, we need to cut spending, we hear that and think, okay, that makes personal sense or specific sense with respect to personal finance, right? So if you're trying to budget, for example, you want to be fiscally conservative in your personal finances. I try to be fiscally conservative in my finances, and I'm about as liberal as it gets, right? Fiscal conservative makes sense for personal finances. But running a country is very different, right? And when Republicans themselves don't, follow their own advice with respect to national economies, they don't behave with fiscal responsibility. They don't behave fiscally conservative. Think about it. Donald Trump added twice as much to the national debt as President Biden. Donald Trump deficit spent. He spent more than tax revenues brought in all 4 years he was in office, not just with COVID. So he was fiscally profligate by conservative zone standards. And yet the perception advantage is, because he's a Republican, because he's a businessman, that he is better on the economy. It's a perception advantage. The facts are on our side in that GDP, unemployment, wage gains, small business output, like all of these things tend to favor Democrats when Democrats are in charge compared to Republicans, but the perception is different. And ultimately, even though Ben Shapiro would say facts don't care about your feelings do matter more, because it doesn't matter if you have the facts. If people believe contrary to the facts, well, they're going to vote that way. So it's incumbent on us to make sure we understand the facts don't speak for themselves, and we have to really make a persuasive case. But when you think about it, why is it so hard to make a persuasive case? Well, I would argue at least one of the reasons is that right-wing media, which is generally better funded and bigger than left-wing media, to the extent that it exists, both in the mainstream and alternative media, they're incentivized to really downplay the Democrats' economic successes and to really grouse and grumble about it when it happens. So I want to play you several clips which really emphasize this, of the Fox propaganda network struggling in real time to cope with the economic successes of the Biden-Harris administration, either trying to downplay them or avoid associating the success with President Biden and Vice President Harris altogether. So we're going to give you a smattering of clips in real time showing Fox News hosts struggling to cope with the positive economic reality under Democrats.
Raining, here we go. The third straight record close for the blue chips. The S&P 500 also closing at all-time highs. Tomorrow, the financials did really well. As we were watching over the past several months, we've got former TD Ameritrade CEO Joe Mowgli at a game, how they will do in dropping rates. That'll do it for us. Kudlow's next.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. All right, Kamala Harris's tax hikes would kill 800,000 jobs.
So you see that? You see how it seamlessly transitions from, again, they're ringing the bell. The stock market's doing so damn well under Biden-Harris. Transitions instantly to Larry Kudlow, a Fox News host and former Trump economic advisor, who instantly says, the vice president's economic plans are a total disaster and everything sucks. That might help explain part of the reason why the perception advantage generally lies with Republicans over Democrats. Some more clips.
Great to have you. Thank you very much, Jeffrey Small. Here we go. Closing bell. Let the balloons be released. The blue chips make history for the fourth straight day. A record for the Dow, a record for the S&P. That's going to do it for the Claim and Countdown. Kudlow is next.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. Donald Trump announces a new American industrialism, create millions of jobs, raise wages, make the U.S. into a manufacturing powerhouse. More on that in just a moment. Later in the show, we'll have Senator John Kennedy talk about Joe Biden leaving his successor a world of disorder. And Vivek Ramaswamy to talk.
So there you go. Again, transitions instantly into something positive about Donald Trump and his economic agenda, even though he's not in office. No acknowledgement of the positive economic gains under the Biden-Harris administration, and actually suggests that President Biden is leaving somebody a world of disaster, even though we just saw the positive economic news. Some more clips.
But is this rally here to stay?
Oh, no. And by the way, the NASDAQ is 700 points from its all-time high. If the NASDAQ doesn't make an all-time high with this news, that is not good. The Dow and S&P, right now, the S&P is at 21 times next year's earnings, assuming $280 of earnings.
Why can't you let us all be happy?
You
We're
can be
all
happy
making money here.
if you're.
You see, again, even Stuart Varney, who grades Trump on a curve and grades the vice president much more harshly, even though he's one of the more fairer Fox News hosts, even he's like, dude, why are you poo-pooing this news? makes you wonder, would he be inclined to do so if Donald Trump were president? I don't believe so. Some more clips.
We're looking at the markets this morning, Congressman, and certainly, Chairman, excuse me, you've got the Dow down 123 right now, and some of this is because investors are looking to what could be the tax policy under a Harris administration. Many
actually
say that they believe that she baited former President Trump and did well last night, and she was well-spoken and well-prepared. Don't want to debate that with you, but the Trump tax cuts are set to
So you see what happened after the debate in which Vice President Harris utterly destroyed Donald Trump. There was a brief lull in the stock market at one point, and Fox News hosts on air, reluctantly acknowledging that she defeated him, tried to spin that as that being the reason that the markets were down. So again, you see the calculus, which we've talked about before. According to Fox, if there's positive economic news, it has to be because of a Republican, either when they're in or out of office. And then if there's bad news, well, it's not the Republican's fault. Even if the Republican is in office, it's really the Democrats' fault. You see how they've got it all worked out? So transparently funny and pathetic. But when I was almost at a news organization, when a propaganda network as well-funded and as influential as Fox, and again, Fox isn't the only one to do it. You have the Daily Wire doing this sort of stuff, Stephen Crowder, Tim Pool, all of the right-wing major influencers in mainstream and alternate media, when they also subscribe to that standard where everything good is because of a Republican, no matter who's in charge, and everything bad is because of a Democrat, no matter who's in charge, it's easy to see how that reinforces a perception advantage on the economy that favors Republicans, because mainstream media doesn't do that. Mainstream media, I would argue, also tends to generously grade Republicans on a curve, and I've given you examples in the past. Here's another example of Larry Kudlow.
So, day after Fed Chairman Jay Powell sent Kamala Harris a 50 basis point election gift and completely contradicted himself on the economy, whatever, the stock market roared. Okay, our own Jerry Willis on the story. Jerry, what's cooking?
So, again, that's Larry Kudlow, a Fox host, a former Trump economic advisor, complaining about a Fed rate cut, which is something that you would think would make people happy, given that it will lower interest rates, lower costs for people. But it's not good news, and he's very upset about it because it's happening under a Democrat, and he thinks that that will be electorally advantageous for Vice President Harris. Meanwhile, Kudlow and Trump in 2020, when Trump was president, were actively pressuring the Federal Reserve to not make decisions which would hurt Donald Trump politically. So when it's in his best interest electorally, it's okay for Republicans to publicly pressure the Fed to make certain decisions. But it's not okay for the Fed to make certain decisions if it advantages a Democrat. You see what I'm saying? Again, a double standard. And he absolutely is so upset, visibly upset about the stock market performance. And so, folks, we could keep going on and on about this. And it is fun to delight in the visible on-air despair of MAGA Republicans in media like Larry Kudlow and just the Fox propaganda network in general. But it's also really important to understand a couple of things. Number one, there is an asymmetry that they are constantly reinforcing. And number two, despite all of that, we have polls, we have reason to believe that Donald Trump's advantage on the economy is rapidly shrinking. Now, could that change? Could the trajectory change in the next 5 weeks? Absolutely. Or could it plateau? Could the vice president close the gap and keep it within, 5 or 6 points, but never equal it out or never take the edge overall in aggregate polling on the economy? That's also very possible. But it's incumbent on each and every one of us, me, you, people watching, the people you share this videos with, make sure they like and subscribe, to take the facts at our disposal and make a more persuasive case and say, hey, listen, actually, there's very little factual basis to support the deference that Donald Trump enjoys on the economy. He was fiscally irresponsible by Republicans' own standards. The macroeconomic reality under President Biden is pretty damn good when you consider what Trump left him. And that's the other thing, too. When people, complain about the situation, we have to be fair and say, listen, to the extent that there's economic hardship, I'm not going to deny that. But you do understand that Donald Trump created the mess that the cleanup made painful, right? The mess was painful. The cleanup was painful. It's not fair to give Trump a pass on presiding over the mess and blame Democrats entirely for cleaning it up. Maybe what we should do is have a situation where we reward the Democrats for the painful but necessary and actually quite successful cleanup of the mess that Donald Trump left, and give them another term to try to deliver on that, instead of doing what we almost always do, which is elect a Republican after Democrats clean up the mess of the previous Republican, and then that Republican makes a mess, and then we elect a Democrat to clean it up. Maybe we should break the cycle and actually just reward Democrats for their positive economic success, for cleaning up the mess left for them by Republicans, and actually give them a blank slate. Give them another 4 years of not having to clean up Republican messes and see what it might deliver for the American people, including conservative voters. Just my thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.